Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 105 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. I'm down here in the bunker. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm here, as I always am, with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. How you feeling today, Dave?
I'm doing well, Jeff. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. We kind of ran into some of that holiday backup,
malaise,
and just kind of things getting busy. And,
yeah.
So it's been hard for us to get together, but here we are.
Get the schedule going. Yep. I like the athletic kind of zippered pullover parka jumpsuit thing you're wearing.
Oh,
that's
thank
really
you.
nice.
I actually wish it was a jumpsuit.
Yeah,
right. But I think it's a deep purple,
fleecy.
Yeah, fleecy.
Glenn Hughes, in honor of Glenn Hughes.
Who's Glenn Hughes?
Deep purple.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I got you. Right.
It's a pop culture rock and roll reference.
I know, but the lineup of that band has changed a zillion times.
Okay.
So I when I hear Deep Purple, I think David Coverdale.
All right.
Right.
Fine.
Okay.
You don't like my references. I see where this is going.
All right. I'm always trying to. As Johnny Pop, I get a little prickly.
You're really living into that title, aren't you?
I enjoy
you
it.
Like
very
it
much.
a lot.
I do. I do. So, I'm doing well. I'm trying to get back into. It's always it's difficult kind of get back into the rhythm when we've been away from it.
Right.
But I'm ready to dive in. You ready?
I am. Yeah. I don't know. You think the audience is getting a little bit of Aeneid fatigue?
Well, I'm going to let the audience know what you said on the way over here.
What did I say?
You said that even you were feeling a little Aeneid fatigue.
Well, what carries me through is the words of Jean Biagio Conti. Right, in Latin literature, a history.
Yes.
Which he said, by common consent, I'm paraphrasing, but it's close. By common consent, the Aeneid is the best poem by the best poet of all time.
Ah, yes, okay.
And I'm just clinging to that.
Gotcha.
As we go through, I don't want to say slog, we go through Book VII here.
Right.
Realizing we have many more episodes to go.
We do.
Before we sleep tonight.
We do.
Right?
But we might, after this one, dip our toes into a few different pools, right? Maybe talk about some other things, and maybe take a break from it and come back at it with full vigor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, will we be dipping our toes in an above-ground pool or an underground pool, they say?
Are we going to get back into that again?
It's been a year. People may not remember, but they call this in pop culture terms a deep cut.
Yeah, exactly. So do you want to remind the
No.
Okay, all right.
No, I want them to go back and listen to the episodes that were December of 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow. What a memory.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about where exactly is the pool. Jeff, we got a shout out.
We do. This goes to Trent and Alicia Hordijk. Mm-hmm. And so apparently Trent and Alicia they're celebrating their first anniversary coming up.
Yes, their first wedding anniversary is coming up December 10.
Yeah.
When is that? That's this coming Saturday, isn't it?
Yes. So I think by etiquette, you still have like 5 days to get him a gift.
I do. What do you think I should get for Trent and Alicia?
Maybe that Conte book.
You think so?
Yeah, exactly.
You know that every year in anniversaries there is some kind of material or substance that represents it. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, I've looked at that list. Everybody knows, the first one is, I forget what the first one is.
It's something really cheap, like paper mache,
right? Pipe
cleaner, I don't know.
But everyone knows 25 is silver and 50 is gold.
And 75 is platinum.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And 100-year anniversaries, matching coffins, I think. So I went a little macabre there.
But between the 1 and 25, there's lots of absurd kind of stuff. Right, exactly.
Tin foil. Who knows what's going on? So I'm not getting Trent and Alicia anything like that. But this shout out is their anniversary present.
Yes.
Trent has only been listening to the podcast for just a few short weeks.
Okay.
Interesting anecdote here. You want to hear this?
I want to hear it.
I tried to introduce Trent to the podcast, and he had a very good question. He said, "Do you have to know Latin in order to listen to the podcast?"
And you said,
"Of course not.
No. It's a nice added bonus,
right?
But you don't need it, of course not." And so that gave him the permission. Oh, I need to check this out.
Yeah, and he dove right in. He started out with Cranks for the Memories, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the first appearance of one of our best guests on the program.
Yeah, Lazy Steve.
Right, yeah. Lazy Steve.
Right. He's been. I have a feeling he's going to show up.
He's going to show up
soon. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he writes. I thought this was funny. By giving me baldness, the Lord has taught me what humility is. By giving me Alicia, his wife, The Lord has taught me what beauty is.
Spoken like a man who's been married almost 1 year. No, I'm just kidding. That's very sweet.
Very nice, Trent.
Isn't that nice? So happy anniversary to you both. Thanks for living. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope you continue to enjoy it.
He's got a lot of episodes to catch up on.
Oh, he's got a lot of work to do. It's too bad he's a full-time student because maybe he should drop out, you think? Just drop out?
Just to listen to the podcast?
Yeah, catch up.
Take a break. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But I believe in Trent.
All right.
I believe, yes. So, Dave, we are back in the Aeneid this week. We are going to get back into Book VII. We made it kind of roughly, I think, about halfway through that book last time. And so just to remind the audience, the Trojans are here on the Italian boot. They're looking to kind of carve out their new Troy here. They've made a shaky alliance with King Latinus there,
whose wife Amata
is not on board.
No, she's not. No. Lovey doesn't find much to admire in this newcomer, this upstart Aeneas.
Right.
And their daughter Lavinia is already betrothed to a Rutulian Hercules kind of a guy, namely Turnus.
Turnus, right. And so Amata was all in favor of that particular union, and she doesn't like these plans being shaken up. And so we're dealing with some of the initial fallout from that. And this is going to spill over into blood and gore fairly soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of fallout, boy, I tell you. Now,
you made a double pop culture reference there.
Did I?
Right. So I think the one you think you're making is the one from The Simpsons.
Okay.
Right, where Fall Out Boy is the sidekick to what's the
Atomic Man.
Atomic Man, right, right. Are you aware of the band that took the name from
I have never listened to any of their music.
Yes.
I do know that they are a band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I threw that in for you.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Excellent. All right. Hey, should we start with our opening quote here?
Yes. Let's have the Ope quote.
Okay. This comes from an article called The Shield of Turnus, from the referencing something from the latter part of this book that we're in, by M.R. Gale in the journal Greece and Rome back in 1997.
I was in grad school at the time.
So was I.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What does Mr. Gale have to say about the Shield of Turnus?
Well, he starts as it's Britishy.
Okay.
It already irritates me. He says 2 pieces of armor are described.
Not 2 pieces?
2 pieces. No, it's a 2-piece.
Okay.
It's a 2-piece set. 2 pieces of armor are described. Turnus's triple-crested helmet, decorated with an image of the fire-breathing chimera, and his shield, depicting the metamorphosis of Io. In what follows, I will argue that these 2 images suggest 2 competing interpretations of the character and fate of their wearer. Turnus can be viewed as an innocent victim of the gods, caught between the machinations of Juno and Jupiter's plans for the future of Rome, or as an enemy of order and peace, irredeemably compromised by his furor and battle lust, who must be destroyed so that the new golden age of Augustus can eventually be established. Abundant examples of either reading can be found in the critical literature of recent years, and it seems to me that both are in fact suggested by the text of the poem. The ambiguity surrounding Turnus's character and motivation can be further clarified in the light of the poet's handling elsewhere in the Aeneid and in the Eclogues and the Georgics of passion and violence and the possibility or impossibility of transcending them. These themes, I will suggest, are embodied in Turnus's 2 emblems, the fire-breathing monster and the defenseless woman transformed into an animal through the desires and jealousies of the gods.
Interesting.
So this shows up at the very end of this book.
Right.
And as I'm reading this opening quote, I'm not even sure we'll be able to get to the end of the book.
I think we will.
Okay.
Well, we'll see.
All right. But I find this kind of stuff interesting. That kind of layer of symbolism, that the first time we see Turnus in this armor, we see kind of the duality of his persona.
Okay.
And it struck me also on the way driving over here. Bob Seger was on the radio, and when Bob Seger comes on the radio, I tend to tune out.
This is before you picked me up.
This is before I picked you up, right? So I tuned out and I started thinking about the Aeneid, right? Do you ever just drive around thinking about the Aeneid?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about, so in the second half of the Aeneid is usually thought to be the Achilles phase, right? This is the Iliad. This is the Iliad phase of the poem. We've gotten through the Odyssey phase,
yes,
right?
We're in the Iliadic.
Right. So in terms of kind of corollaries, it strikes me that, okay, Aeneas is the invader. He's coming into this foreign land. Superficially, he would be our Achilles character.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And that would make Turnus, the rival of Aeneas, would be the Hector character.
Correct.
But I was thinking that while that, I certainly am on board with that, it strikes me that in terms of how the story plays out, who these characters are and how they relate to others, is that Aeneas is very much more like Hector. He has a son, We kind of see him as maybe not quite a family man, but Iulus has been part of this story, and
Yes.
and I think that makes him more sympathetic. Well, Turnus is the one, as this little clip of this article says, he's the one who becomes visited by the Fury,
Right.
and so it's that rage that overtakes him. And so while Turnus kind of plays that superficial Hector role, he's actually the Achilles here because he's the one that rage turns into this monster. And while we see Aeneas more as kind of we see him more domestically, even though he's the invader. What do you think about that? So Virgil kind of playing with these archetypes.
Right. Well, my only question is, what does this have to do with Bob Seger?
Well, as I said, when Bob Seger comes on the radio, I find it very easy to tune him out.
I see.
And my mind goes elsewhere.
We've got Book VII, Who Needs Tomorrow?
Right, exactly.
Let's make it last.
Yes, exactly. So let's work on some of these night moves here.
Right. Well, I think that most often, Aeneas is compared by the literature not to Achilles until he's the rage machine at the very end.
At the very end.
Book 12.
Yes.
He's most often compared unfavorably to Paris. This is a reverse Paris and Menelaus kind of a story. Whereas Paris comes to Sparta and steals Helen, and that's the cause of the war, the belli causa.
Yeah. Now
what we have is Aeneas coming to Italy and stealing Turnus's fiancée.
Right. Okay. I see. I can see that as well. Right.
So I do think you make a good point that Turnus is compared more to Achilles here than to Hector because of the rage.
Yeah.
I'm not completely convinced by Gale's argument. I find that perhaps the interpretation of the two images, the fire-breathing chimera and the metamorphosis of Io on the shield, I think he may be reading more into that than he really ought to. He may be guilty here of the standard academic trope of seeing things that aren't there.
You think so?
I wonder.
It strikes me that they are such distinct images that, in a defense of Gale, it would seem to me that Virgil wouldn't just drop these just for the sake of, like, imagine this picturesque piece of armor, that it has to mean something. I mean, that seems in keeping with kind of the way that Virgil kind of layers this poem.
So the fire-breathing chimera represents severity, savagery, cruelty, strength, and speed. That's a very martial image.
Yes.
But I don't understand how Io, the metamorphosis of Io, unless it's just some kind of an insult to Juno. Because of course, whenever Io is mentioned, and we maybe should fill in the reader in case they're unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Io was a lovely Greek woman with whom Zeus, in his typical philandering way, fell in love, and after consummating his desire, he had to hide her from his wife, Hera or Juno. So he transformed her into a cow, thinking that would be the perfect disguise.
Right.
And then she was compelled to wander, harassed by a gadfly, until such time as I think she was tied up by Hera and guarded by Argus with 100 eyes.
Right.
And then Hermes was sent by Zeus to slay Argos and
free Io.
And free Io.
Right.
So I really don't understand how this plays into a characterization of Turnus.
Right. I think what I would say is that I think Gale is trying to say is that we see in the two images Turnus as kind of a rage monster on the field, and then as Io, victim of the gods, right?
So because there is a victim portrayed on Turnus's shield, then Turnus is to be identified as a victim.
As a victim, or at least that's Virgil is saying there are two ways to interpret this guy.
I see.
And he kind of leaves it to the audience to decide.
Well, that's a little more persuasive. I don't think I really understood what Gale was saying.
But I like the layer that you added, though, because the story of Io has specifically something to do with Juno.
Yes,
right.
It's an insult.
And so Juno is what we see there is that Juno isn't so much pro-Turnus as she is anti-Aeneas.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
She is very opportunistic.
Right, and so maybe that's a kind of a symbol that says he's going to be used by Juno.
Anyone who will oppose Aeneas is a friend of Juno.
Exactly.
And Turnus is very, very disposable, right?
Right. So I think maybe that's what Gale is seeing in that imagery. And I think that when we get to the very end of the Aeneid, right, that very last scene where we have Aeneas versus Turnus, there's all kinds of ambiguities.
Absolutely.
And how are we supposed to read that last scene?
Right.
And how are we supposed to interpret Aeneas and then therefore also the character of Turnus? And
yes.
Maybe he's sowing the seeds right here. Yeah.
While we're talking about shields and images and so forth, I am reminded of our earlier discussion about what you're wearing.
Yes.
And it occurs to me that this is a modern analog of this really ancient practice of decorating shields and so forth. You and I have both been trying in our senescence.
Yes.
Right? What are we now? Quinquagenarians almost?
Yes, I am. You are not quite yet.
I'm close.
You're
Boy,
close.
am I close to turning 50.
Yeah.
And so we've been trying to, get ourselves in a little bit better shape.
Yep.
You got to have the gear. Right?
Yes.
You got to have the filas and the pumas, or the puma, I don't know what to call it, and the champion and all the other stuff.
Right.
And just by virtue of wearing something that looks athletic, it's kind of a sympathetic magic, right?
It's very true.
It's why people wear jerseys of sports stars.
Yes.
Because you hope that some of their tremendous athletic prowess will rub off just by virtue of wearing something with their name on it.
It's very true, right?
It's very silly, but
it is.
I think it's an analog to this ancient practice of decorating your shield with the chimera.
Right. Or, as we know that the ancients did, you put the head of the Gorgon on your shield, right?
Yeah, the epitropaic.
Exactly. And so you're out there to petrify, figuratively, if not literally, your enemy, right?
Right. It's like wearing a necklace that's strung with wolf's teeth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have one of those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you wear it to the gym all the time.
All the time.
Right.
But yeah, there is that, dressing for success or or fake it till you make it.
Yes.
It's all wrapped up in that, right?
Dress for the job that you want, not the one that you have.
Exactly.
It's similar, I guess, on the Virgilian battlefield and in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And it's also here, I think, in the gym and also on the battlefield, it's also about kind of intimidating those around you as well, right? Yeah, you're just kind of rubbing it in their faces. Is that
so? When you wear your champion sweatshirt and you look at the stack of weights, the stack of weights just kind of withers a little bit?
A little bit.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So we got to get back into this. Where were we?
We're in it, Jeff.
Okay. Well, I mean, we got to pick up where we left off.
Okay.
Right. So I think we're getting a bit ahead of things talking about the end of the book.
Yes.
So I think when we last were doing the Aeneid, Juno she's returned to the area. She's back from Argos.
Yeah, a place sacred to her.
Right. And so she is not happy about what she sees. And of course, as we've talked about, Juno knows the fate. She knows how this story is going to end, but she also knows that she can mess up all the stuff between point A and point B.
That's right.
To make it as miserable as possible.
That's correct.
Right. All right, I'm going to read a little bit of Lombardo's translation, which will get us back into this.
Right, and this is, we're about halfway through. It's around line 300.
Yeah.
Okay.
At home on the land, their ships empty, she stopped in mid-air, pierced with grief, and shaking her head, poured forth these words. Ah, hated race, Phrygian fates at odds with mine. Couldn't they have died on the Sigean plain? Defeated? Couldn't they have endured defeat? Didn't burning Troy cremate these men? No, they found a way through fire and foe. My divinity must be wearing thin, or I have grown content, my wrath appeased. Not exactly. When they were thrown out of their country, I persecuted the outcasts all over the deep blue sea. All the powers of sea and sky have been used against them. So she's mad.
Yes.
Yeah. She's upset.
Do you find Juno a little one note?
She is a little bit one-dimensional here.
Right.
Yeah. I talk about this in my myth class. She plays largely a very thankless role in myth, right? She's just kind of reacting to what her philandering husband is doing. Maybe this is a little bit different. She's arm wrestling with fate itself.
Right.
Right.
To interpret this a little bit, I think that in the last 20 years or so, film or movies, as I like to call them, they've experimented more with the psychology of the villain a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely comfortable with it because there's almost a valorizing of villainous behavior and wicked behavior. But I think it's kind of a natural result of the fact that the villain in most of the movies has always been so one-dimensional. And so Juno is a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to be a villainess, your role is really, really defined. There's not a lot of development, unlike the protagonist.
Right, exactly. No, I've noticed that in films too. I mean, I've heard people say like the last 20, 25 years has been kind of the era of the anti-hero.
Yeah.
Now, literature, film has always had anti-heroes.
Right.
But you have them, it makes me think of characters like Tony Soprano or Walter White or Dexter. And I think that modern narratives have kind of gone out of their way to, one, make them much more complex and nuanced,
right,
and two, sympathetic in a way that villains hadn't been before. And so,
right.
And I think the flip side of that is that the hero, then the good guys, not always, but often, they become one-dimensional. And that's
a great point.
And I think it kind of comes. I think it comes out of a very cynical landscape where the idea
right.
that someone could be moral and good kind of comes off as corny.
Yes, you're right.
And so where do you find interest? Where do you find nuance? Well, it's in the people who are conflicted.
Yeah.
Or even in portrayals of Batman. He's a hero, but is he?
Right.
You know? So I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that pendulum to swing.
Right.
Yeah.
You just said everything I wanted to say. That's exactly right. So the first part you said that the villain has become more complex.
Mm-hmm.
That seems wise and good in terms of story development.
Right.
And I think that this is something Virgil does quite well with Turnus.
Yes.
As we'll see. But the second part, making the villain more sympathetic.
Yeah.
I can't really approve of that. Because the villain is often engaged in very immoral behavior.
Right.
And it makes it hard to cheer for the hero.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think there is. I think there's value in making the villain not just simply a monster.
Correct.
Right. That I think you see that evil is part of being human.
Yes.
Right?
But it's not just a result of circumstance.
Yeah.
Right. When the villain is portrayed as completely his villainy or her villainy is completely a result of circumstance. Mm-hmm. Then the story's dead.
Right.
There has to be actual will.
Yes, exactly right. So if you like to take the example of Tony Soprano, have you watched The Sopranos?
No.
Okay.
Well, if it's a pop culture reference, I don't know it.
So it's a mob. It's a show
Yes.
about the Italian mob, right?
In New Jersey.
Right. And
somewhere.
one of the ways that it was different than I think most kind of mob movies or shows is that we see the central character Tony as a mobster doing horrible mobster things, but we also see him as a husband and a father, right? And I think the show does a very good in kind of suggesting that it's not just poor Tony, the victim of his circumstance and his family, is that he chooses this, right? And
so there are many good things in his life,
yes,
which are inconsistent with the wicked things he does.
Exactly, right. And when you see him in the house, when you see him with his son and with his daughter, you can see the show. Okay, you can relate to that.
Right.
You can relate to him kind of worrying about his children,
right?
But also choosing this lifestyle that turns him into a monster.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
That seems very good storytelling.
Good.
At least as you've described it.
All right, so Juno,
right,
in her one-dimensional kind of mustache twirling. Does Juno have a mustache? In this?
No, but they don't do that anymore. That's Snidely Whiplash.
Right. That's really old school.
Yeah,
right?
that's from the Canadian Mounties, right?
Yes.
Dudley Do-Right's opponent, Snidely Whiplash.
Exactly.
What
right.
a name.
Yeah. Well, kind of the quintessential one-dimensional villain, right?
Right. He's the kind of person who's going to tie someone to the railroad track
all the time. You would think he'd get a different idea every once in a while.
No.
Snidely's not too bright. So Juno decides that she's going to pull out the big guns, and she sends this fury, Allecto. Mm-hmm. And so Allecto, she shows up in Hesiod.
Right.
We learn that she is the daughter of Gaia, and she's had a very colorful origin study.
Yes.
Fertilized by the blood spilled from Uranus when Kronos castrated him.
Huh.
Yeah.
That was a very fruitful surgery. There were a lot of things that came out of that, including Venus.
Venus, right. That's what everybody looks at in that story. But no, remember the blood drops have these own kind of horrible results.
Including Allecto, one of the Furies.
Yep. And so she's the sister of Tisiphone and Megaera. And those three Furies, they fly themselves around with the snakes for hair, blood drips from their eyes, and they have bat wings. Creepy creatures.
So it's a chimera.
Yeah, more or less.
Mm-hmm. A combination of several different animals with a little bit of human thrown in there.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps the most vivid depiction of the Furies would be in the third play of Aeschylus, right? The Eumenides.
Yes, right.
From the Oresteia trilogy.
Yes. There's a wonderful anecdote about that, and I need to track down where this comes from.
I hope this is a digression, because that's mostly what we're doing.
Right. One more, please.
Yes.
All right. So in my myth class, we're doing tragedy. We're talking
Right.
tragedy. And one of the students asked, who went to see these plays?
Right.
And there's lots of question about, like, were women even allowed into the theater? Right?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That's the consensus opinion.
But one of the counter arguments is that there's this famous anecdote that during the production of The Furies, when it was on stage, that when the Furies came dancing out, the story goes, it was so terrifying that all the pregnant women in the audience immediately went into labor. Right. Now, of course, not true, but the assumption behind the anecdote is that women were there.
Yeah.
So some people, that's one small piece of evidence that
Interesting.
Maybe it was a mixed audience.
That would be an odd anecdote to invent.
It would.
It's very unusual.
Yes.
So that's decent evidence.
All right.
So that's the third play in the trilogy behind what's the first, the Agamemnon
And then the Libation Bearers.
and the Libation Bearers.
Right. Yep.
So Allecto comes on the scene
Yes.
as sent by Juno, and Allecto is going to come down and inhabit whom?
She goes after Amata, the queen and wife of Latinus, and then she also later turns her rage on Turnus as well.
Yes. And I believe that Allecto comes down into Amata in the guise of a snake.
Yes.
It's very disturbing. Slithers down into her robe.
It's creepy. How about we do a little Latin here?
I'd love to.
Yes. So this is, I think we're picking it up at line 323 and following?
Correct. And this is the scene of the possession of Amata by Allecto?
Yes.
All right, here we go. 323. Haec ubi dicta dedit terdras horrenda petiwit, luctifica lecto dirdrardrab seda dearum, infernis quiet tenebris qui tristia bella, irdrai quinsidiae quet crimina noxia cordi, odid ad ipsa pater Plutono de resurores, tartareae monstrum tot se vertit in ora, tam saevae facies tot pululat atraco lubris.
Nicely done, as always.
Thank you. That's some great elisions here.
Yeah, isn't that?
In that second line, luctifica lecto dirarab. So an elision, as the audience probably knows, is when one Latin word ends in a vowel or an M, and the next one begins with a vowel or an H. The two words are kind of crushed together in pronunciation.
Right, and that slurring of words often gives a it's just a kind of a wonderful dramatic effect.
Yes, it's a tremendous layering of meaning. So here we have luctificam, which means something like sorrow bringing, right? Mm-hmm. And that word is combined with the person of Allecto, who's bringing the sorrow.
Yes.
So it's a visual and an oral representation of the meaning.
Yes. And so not quite the possession of Amata, but this is more kind of the Juno sending her and get a little bit of the backstory, right?
Sorry, I'm too enthusiastic there.
Yeah. So Lombardo translates, with these words, Juno descended to earth, a terrifying presence, and called forth Allecto from the home of the dread goddesses and the shadows below. Gruesome Allecto, whose heart is set on war and wrath, intrigues and crime. She is hateful even to Pluto, who sired her. Hateful to her Tartarian sisters. So many shapes she assumes, so cruel her faces, so vile the black vipers that sprout from her scalp. So we get actually an alternate parentage here. So we had just said
not
that
Gaia,
not Gaia, but here Pluto is the father of
right.
But he wants nothing to do with this particular daughter.
No.
Yeah. So Allecto comes out, and yes, as you were saying, she drops onto Amata, drops into the chest of Amata, and yes, kind of slithers its way into her and kind of takes over her
down
persona.
into her garments and then into her being.
Yeah. And drives her mad with this rage.
Right. And one of the interpretations of this, of course, is Cleopatra. Because very recently in the history of the Romans, we have the death of Cleopatra by suicide via asp.
Yes.
The double suicide of herself and Mark Antony. Mm. And she was, of course, the opponent, right? The villainess of Augustus, Octavian's life.
Right.
And so when she died in Alexandria, this was very fresh in the imagination of the Roman elite.
Yes, exactly. Kind of a very obvious corollary.
That's right.
Now, speaking of villains,
right?
You were just talking about villains as victims of circumstances versus villains who choose their path.
Right.
Does this absolve Amata of being a villain? Is her circumstance the fact that she's possessed by an Allecto? So if you were to compare it to to the rage of Achilles, Homer does not say that some kind of fury descended upon Achilles and insinuated itself. It was a chosen rage.
It's who he is. It's his core identity.
Yeah.
He was born to do this.
Right. So do you see Achilles' kind of rage as circumstantial because it's innate?
No, because nature and circumstance are separate things.
Okay.
If you are born with a certain nature, then your character flows from that naturally. It's not like the circumstances compelled you into it. And so I'm going to have to get a little theological to answer your question about
let's do it.
Amata and Allecto.
Okay.
But Amata, before the visitation of the Fury, Amata is already intent on the destruction of Aeneas.
Good point.
And having her way, with Turnus being the husband of her daughter.
Yeah.
So what Juno does, is added to a willing participant. Right, there is some consent, you might say, in Amata receiving Allecto, the Fury. You can't imagine Allecto coming into Latinus or some other sort of character in the story,
right?
Because they have different purposes and motives.
Yeah. It strikes me that like Amata or even Achilles too, they have it's like like a predilection for alcoholism, right? You have kind of a predilection to an addiction, and what Juno's doing here is kind of is tweaking it.
She's fanning that flame.
She's fanning that flame, whereas in another character, it would be more easy to resist. Maybe not with the gods involved, but you know what I'm saying.
You wouldn't try it because it wouldn't succeed.
Right? Yeah.
That person is not going to be susceptible to that particular vice or that particular display of wrath.
Yes. Right. So it's why the ring is given to Frodo.
Yes,
because he's
thought to be unsusceptible to its temptation.
Exactly right,
allures.
Or at least less susceptible.
Yes,
right.
because he's simple folk.
Right.
We all know that short people, like Frodo and like myself, right, less susceptible to certain kinds of temptations.
Is that true?
No, it's the Napoleon complex. Is the opposite. Right. And interestingly, we've already run down Tolkien, but and Lewis.
Yeah.
Interestingly, at the end of that story, the opposite is proven true, right? Frodo is just as susceptible to the temptations.
Yes.
It just took longer to get there.
Right.
Which I think is good storytelling.
It is good storytelling. Part. Yeah, exactly. When he's standing in the cracks of doom and he decides, maybe I'm not going to go through with this.
Right. After all this, no, I'm going to keep it for myself.
Right. So back to Lombardo. This is how he translates how an Amata goes to her husband.
Right.
And she tries to kind of talk him out of this.
Now that she has Allecto, right, within her. She has the fury bent on rage and bloodlust and so forth.
Right. So who's really speaking here?
Right.
So she says, will you give Lavinia to Teucrian exiles, you, her father? Have you no pity left for your daughter or yourself? No pity for her mother, whom this traitor will desert with the first north wind, sailing away with our girl as plunder? So then wasn't this how Paris entered Lacedaemon and bore off Helen to Ilium? So there's that comparison, right? What of your solemn promise?
Right. So if I can just interrupt you.
Yeah.
So notice the way in which Amata tries to convince Latinus first. It's completely an appeal to his fatherly care and affection.
Yes.
It doesn't go based on justice. It doesn't go based on her own interest, because I think ultimately it is Amata's interest that matters here. But, as a shrewd orator or oratrix, she begins by appealing to his sense of fatherly affection.
Yeah.
Don't treat your daughter this way. And she pulls in historical precedent.
Yes.
Don't you recognize Aeneas is just another Paris?
Yeah.
He's come here to steal Helen.
Yeah.
And then moves next to the question of right and wrong.
Yes. What of your solemn promise?
Right. Can you continue there?
Yes. What of your old love for your own? What of your hand so often pledged to Turnus, your kinsman? If it has been decided that we need a son-in-law of foreign stock, if the words of your father Faunus are so important, then I maintain that every land not under our rule is a foreign land, and the gods agree. Turnus himself, if he traces lineage, is descended from Innocuous and Acrisius, with roots in Mycenae, the heart of Greece.
Right.
That's actually quite persuasive.
It is persuasive. And I would like to point out that Innocuous here is the son of Io, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is why Io is on the shield of Turnus.
Or one of the reasons why.
Okay, I was trying to run down Gale a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
I was trying to, sail into Gale's crosswinds, you might say.
Yeah.
That was a pun.
What? Oh, Gale. I got it.
Yeah, nobody else did.
Well,
Why do I even try? Why do I come here week after week and unload these puns?
Who knows? Maybe the audience out there, they jump on it and they're cackling with laughter.
Well, we can only hope.
Yes. All right. So
one of the reasons. He is
yes.
descended. I'm sure Gale knows that.
Yeah.
He is descended from Innocuous, and so he's got to show his lineage. But Gale sees in that a story of victimhood.
Yes, or at least one aspect of it. I think we can say that it can be two or three things, right? It doesn't have to be one thing.
All right.
But I think you've hit on, yes, the kind of the historical, legendary purpose of the Io symbol is kind of connects him to this family.
I suppose.
Right? But it means more than that.
So to go back to our gym gear analogy, right? Nobody's going to wear a sweatshirt that says weakness on it.
No.
Right?
No,
You're going to wear champion. No one's going to come up with loser, right?
Right. Exactly.
Could be a business opportunity, though.
Ooh, you think that's a gap that needs to be filled there?
Yeah, right. Instead of champion clothing, how about loser? Or vanquished?
That might have worked in the 90s, I think.
You think so?
Yeah, that's more of a Gen X thing, kind of that kind of loose irony.
They'd live into that.
I don't know how that would fly anymore.
Okay.
Right. So Latinus, he's unmoved by this. He's not persuaded. And that's when she kind of goes full Bacchae.
Allecto, right?
Yeah, she goes full Allecto. Virgil compares her in this wonderful simile to a spinning top, just kind of whirling about, a dervish bouncing from place to place.
Skipping across the courtyard.
Yes, right. And so she grabs her daughter and says, all right, if Latinus isn't on board, I'm going to take her away.
Take matters into my own hands.
Make her unavailable, right? And so, she runs away into the woods. She's shrieking that Bacchus, Dionysus is only worthy of her daughter now. And she goes full bacchant.
Yeah.
And she even grabs her thirsus.
Right.
So
maybe we should explain to the audience what a thyrsus is.
Thyrsus is the staff of Dionysus.
Yes, it's a long piece of wood. It has a pine cone on it.
Top, yeah.
Has some kinds of tendrils of ivy growing around it. It's supposed to be a kind of magic wand, I think.
Yeah.
When he waves it across the landscape, the flowers, come to bloom and so forth.
Right. Yes. Wine or water comes up out of the ground.
Right. And where can you get one of these?
Well, you can actually. I was looking at that. You can get a thirsus of your own on Etsy.
Are you being serious?
I am being serious. Right.
How many did you order?
Do
they come by the dozen?
The one I found was $75.
Oh, you're kidding!
I'm way too cheap. Right. I want to find my thyrsus on a discount rack.
Yeah, I would say so.
Right.
So this is a ruse, right, on Amata's part. She's saying, in order to avoid having my daughter marry Aeneas, if I can't win the argument with my husband Latinus, I'm just going to spirit her away into the woods and say she can only marry Bacchus.
Yes.
That's the only recourse left.
Right, exactly. And so we see a bit of, it reminds me of Euripides' play.
Right.
So she leads not just her daughter, but she gets all the other women of the town whipped up, and they go out on the hillside. She's very much like Agave in the Euripides' play.
Exactly, yep. Throws on a fawn skin and leads the women into the forest.
Yes. Speaking of fawn skins,
right.
It's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett, with offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, has been purveying high-quality translations of the classics and many other fine works to a broad audience for 50 years.
Yes, exactly 50 years. This is their anniversary year.
That's right, the golden one.
Yes, exactly right. So we love these guys. They took a chance on us.
That's right.
Yeah, and
long ago now.
Long ago, they've been with us since the very beginning. And it's one of these where they've been wonderful to us, and they just put out a great product.
They do.
Love their texts. Love the artwork. Love the affordability. This next semester, I've got 2 classes where my textbooks orders are exclusively from Hackett.
That's excellent.
Right.
Yeah. They also put out the fantastic Lingua Latina Per Se Illustrata series,
which is you use on Latin Per Diem.
That's
right?
correct.
Yep.
They picked up that line from the old Focus Publishing, and now they continue to distribute it to a wide audience. Really high quality, full color, hardback materials. All of the books in that series, you really can't beat it.
It's great. So audience, check it out. Go to hackettpublishing.com. Just take a scroll through their huge catalog. It's not just classics, it's everything. And find the stuff that you want. Put it in your little grocery basket. And if you type in the coupon code AN2022, it's Ad Nauseam and the current year.
Yeah, make sure you don't put it in backwards. No typing in 2202NA.
No. Yeah.
That's not going to work.
No, not
you got
at
to
all.
go forward.
AN2022. And Dave, what will that get them?
I think that gets them 1% off and double the price of shipping.
It's 20% off.
Oh, really?
And free shipping.
No way.
Yes.
That is an excellent deal.
It is. Check it out today. This episode of Ad Nauseam also brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Dave, have I talked about how much I love the ratio, how it pours?
No. Why don't you talk a little bit about the pouring of the pour over?
The aesthetic of the pouring. Right?
Yeah, so you're just a poor boy, aren't you?
I'm just a poor boy, right? Yep. Exactly. My story is seldom told. This morning, I brewed up another batch of coffee in my Ratio 8, and it came down to the elegant hand-blown borosilicate carafe.
That's incredible.
And I get it ready to go, and just the way it pours into the cup is worth the price of admission.
It's a thing of beauty,
It is a thing of beauty.
Right.
And I used to have the 6. That was a wonderful machine too, and I've graduated to the 8.
Did you re-gift the 6?
No, I still have it.
Right. Why are you keeping it around?
I have it because
is it just greed?
It's not just greed. The 6 had the craft that kind of keeps the temperature, right?
The hulking flagon,
right? And so I like to keep that on hand if I want to, if I want to have some coffee now and maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, 2 or 3 hours and it's still full temp.
Right, and
that's
that's
amazing.
And that's without the roasting pan underneath.
That's correct.
It's incredible.
So I woke up this morning and my typical routine is to pour some water into the 8.
Yep.
I've got the one with the oyster color and the walnut accents. Fits my kitchen really nicely. And I ground the beans very fine, which actually you're not supposed to do.
Really?
Not for the 8, no, because you have to have a little bit of a coarse grind. It's the instructions say about the consistency or texture of raw sugar or coarse sugar.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you keep any of that on hand?
I keep raw sugar on hand, yeah.
Do you keep coarse sugar?
No, I don't keep coarse sugar.
No, the kind of sugar that, swears at you and is a little bit rude.
This is a terrible house guest.
That's right.
Yeah.
I had to buy some coarse sugar to compare to my coffee just to see how am I supposed to do this. But this morning I grind it up really fine. I ground it up fine because I have an aftermarket cone, right? So for the Ratio 8, you use these really large Chemex paper cones.
Right.
And when I ran out, I bought an Able cone, which is partnered with Ratio. And because it's in the early stages of its life, it works extraordinarily well. So I can extract even more flavor from my coffee.
Very nice.
Yeah, and I had a delicious pot, maybe 3 or 4 cups. Is very good. When I'm working, can't beat it.
Fantastic. So listeners, if you want one of these wonderful machines, the 6 or its older brother, the 8, go to ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com. Pick the machine that you want. And if you put in the code, it is ANCOK5. Klondike 5, yes. ANCO Klondike 5. That will get you 15% off your entire order.
Yeah. Can I just play, Dak and Blecker advocate here for a minute?
Sure.
Maybe someone's saying, Jeff, you and Dave have been talking about the Ratio 5 for how many dozens of episodes now? And I understand it's a great coffee machine.
Yes.
But there's no way I can pay that much because I've looked at the price and, this is not an inexpensive throwaway kind of machine. What would you say to such an objection?
I would say that, like my dad used to say to me, you get what you pay for.
Right.
These are machines that, yes, it's a little bit. It's not cheap.
Right.
But they are exquisite machines, and they will last you a long time.
Yeah. Decades, I'm sure.
Decades, right? Where the other, I've had the Dak and Bleckers and the Senor Cafe.
That's right.
And they last for a little bit, and they sputter out, and they just wind up in the dumpster.
Yeah, 14, 15 months maybe.
Right.
Of squirty plastic, and then they get clogged and they break. It's just not the way to go.
It's not worth it. They look great. They will complement the other wonderful things in your kitchen. Great to look at. Great taste. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Check it out. All right, Jeff, as we get back into it now, Amata, Lovey, the wife of Latinus, is going to take a little bit different tack here.
Right. Well, she's going to go after Turnus. Is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to.
Right. And so in this case, instead of turning into a snake, she takes on the form of one Calube, who is an old priestess of Juno, and uses a shaming tactic here.
Okay.
Right. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you just going to sit there and let these Trojan boys waltz into your territory?
These interlopers?
Yeah. Right. And so that she kind of edges him on that particular way. How about a little bit more Latin here?
I'd love to. Right. So this is line 413, lines 413 and following. And this is the Fury Allecto, right, disguised as Amata speaking to Turnus.
Yes.
Sed fortuna fuit tectis hic Turnus in altis, iam mediam nigra carpebat nocta quietem, Allecto torvam faciet furialia membra, exu et in vultus se transformet anilis, et frontabsque nam rugisar et induit albos, cum vita crinis tum ramin nectit olivae.
Very nice. Now Lombardo.
There's a lot of elisions in there. It's rapid poetry.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just like the previous passage. Lombardo translates, and she threw a torch at the young hero, sticking it in his chest where it smoked with black light. Turnus woke in terror, sweat pouring down, drenching him to the bone. He called madly for arms, groped wildly in the bed for weapons, lusting for steel in the rut of battle, rage crowning all. So it's very Achillean.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
And it's a great translation, by the way.
Yeah, isn't that's so nice, right?
Captures it really nicely. So he is in a dream, right?
Yeah.
And it's a gripping, vivid, violent dream. Do you ever, with your friends, family, discuss dreams?
I haven't lately.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll share them with Beck if it's a particularly kind of odd or weird one.
Right.
Yeah.
I try not to recount disturbing dreams because I don't want to remember them. And of course, as soon as you recount a dream, at least my experience is, then it's stuck there.
Yeah. No, totally
You can't
true.
dislodge it from the memory.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do if you have a disturbing dream is just not think about it. It seems to me.
That works for you?
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah.
But here he has a vivid dream in which this torch is thrown and sticks in his chest.
Yeah.
And he wakes up and what happens?
He goes crazy, right? He goes. He's calling for armor. He's ready for war. Now, one of the things that we kind of just glossed over is is when kind of before she throws the torch, or however we're supposed to imagine that, she tries to shame him, like, what are you doing just sitting around? And I think what's striking is how Turnus just throws it right back at her. It's like you don't think I understand what's going on?
Right.
You don't think I understand what's at stake here?
Mm-hmm.
But it takes kind of this nightmare, this living nightmare, to kind of throw him into overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
So Turnus calls the Rutulians, his kinsmen, to arms against both the Latins and Trojans. Right? So Latinus, he's a traitor now too, because he broke his pledge. And I thought this passage. This is again Lombardo's translation again. He writes that the Rutulians, when Turnus calls them to battle, they were stirred by his good looks. Like, oh, he's handsome.
Right.
Let's follow him. Right.
Why do you find that amusing? You don't think that's how it works?
Well, no, I think it's exactly how it works.
Right.
I think I find that it's like, it reminds me of when there's like some huge political issue.
I was just going to say that.
And they say, let's find out what Mariah Carey has to say about the capital gains tax. Right? You're attractive. You must know something.
Well, I was thinking in terms of the fact that there hasn't been a president under 6 feet tall in something like 150 years.
Is that right?
I think James Madison is a tremendous outlier, and because he was a very small man. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea generally is that it's just human nature to respect large, physically impressive people.
Yes.
And if you're not large and good looking and physically impressive, you're going to have a hard time competing in public.
Right. Exactly. Right. I was just talking in my film class. We were talking about kind of the changes in film that happened in the 1960s, and this, the transition from Eisenhower, who was 70 when he left office, and then JFK, who was 43. And he's this
thick head of hair,
handsome, dashing with his beautiful wife. That's a classic example of that, right? He's handsome. He must know what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's very much, I would say, ingrained in human nature.
Yes,
in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, a couple of weeks ago, you were making some Old Testament references. So I'd like to make one if I may.
Yeah.
The book of 1 Samuel, Saul is chosen as the first king of Israel.
Just thinking of that.
He's a Benjaminite, but they say he's head and shoulders above everyone else. He's much taller and he's good looking.
Yeah.
And so people go after him.
Right. He looks like a king.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
How does one look like a classicist?
I don't know, kind of
frumpy,
schlubby,
full frump.
Full frump, right?
What does schlubby mean? I don't know that.
But
I like it.
We do remember, if you remember the Married to a Classicist episode.
Oh yeah.
One of the games that my wife liked to play at the old conferences was,
is classicist not classicist?
Right. And so she could pick them out just
a mile
away, right?
Well, again, it's dress the part.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Shrumpy, flumpy. You can make up a lot of words.
Floobery.
A
little floobery.
Yeah.
You have to have the tweed jacket with the leather patches on the corners.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So it wasn't just that Turnus was just drop dead handsome. He had a high lineage. He had the right family connections, and he was a good soldier. His prowess in battle was second to none.
How do you keep track of that?
I don't know how they had the scoreboard.
Notches on the shield, maybe.
Maybe that's it.
Ribbons on your spear. I'm being serious.
Yeah.
You're not facetious.
Yeah.
I guess they had the memory of the things he had done, but there had to be some kind of a record keeping, like a little bead system, like when you're playing pool.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Right. Or it reminds me of you'll see like on college football players' helmets, they'll get a little sticker.
That's correct.
If they get a tackle or something.
Right.
Like that, right.
Never occurred to me that the sticker system is. It's a little childish.
That's right.
Sure, you're a grown man pummeling another one at full speed,
Right.
And you get a sticker?
Exactly. That's what I use with my children in potty training.
So here's a sticker for potty training successfully, or for tackling a running back at full speed.
Interrupting a pass.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. But I just thought and I don't know if this is accurate to the Latin, but it's his good looks that are mentioned first.
Right.
Lineage second, and his prowess in battle last. I would reverse those.
Really?
If in terms of
that's because you're a substantive person, right? For you, it's esse quam videri. It's substance over appearance.
I'd like to think so, but
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all fallen into that.
Despite the deep purple sweatshirt you're sporting.
Yeah. But I think we've probably all fallen into that.
Oh, yeah.
That, attractiveness equals intelligence.
Yes. Well, we've talked about this before on the podcast. Since we're digressing, there's good evidence that children that are more attractive get more attention from their parents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a real sad fact of life.
Man, yeah. All right. moving on.
Juno's meddling.
Yeah, so
what's the result?
So in this next episode, so Ascanius sets off to hunt in the woods.
And let's just refresh people on who Ascanius is, because they may be entering this midstream.
Right. So son of Aeneas.
Right.
He also goes by Iulus.
Yeah, so Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, and his mother was Creusa, right? Way
Yes.
back in Troy. And he's been dragged around the Mediterranean. When was his big aristeia? When was his big moment of glory?
Did we miss that?
No. It was Book V. Remember?
Are you talking about the Trojan Game?
Yes.
That was his moment of aristeia?
Yes. It's also, he's the one that alerts his father that the ships are on fire.
Okay.
Right? You forgot that big moment already?
Well, it's a pretty weak moment in terms of aristeia.
We compared it to the Shriners on their motorcycles in the parade.
Exactly right.
It's an important moment
It is
of
an
his
important
coming of age. He's a young Telemachus.
Yeah, but would you call it his aristeia?
It's all he's got so far.
Okay, well, let's see how this pans out.
Right. He's also called Iulus,
Yes.
right? Which is really central to the story because Iulus sounds suspiciously like Julius, who is the father of Augustus Caesar.
Exactly. So he goes off into the woods and he shoots a deer, and it just happens to be the favorite kind of pet of one of Latinus's herdsmen. So the shepherds are upset. You don't want to irritate the shepherds, apparently.
No, this is a very special animal.
Yes.
Right? This is an albino stag.
Yeah, right.
And these are a rare kind of creature. Ascanius is just innocently hunting, right? It's what the children of nobility do as they practice for war. They innocently hunt. But this animal is special.
Yeah. So the animal staggers back to his master before dying, and the herdsman summons the other shepherds to track down the hunter. And then the Trojans, sensing a commotion, come to Ascanius' aid. Many Latins are slain in a brief skirmish, and then each side retreats temporarily.
Yeah, so this is like accidentally running over your neighbor's dog.
Yeah, right.
I've never done that, and hopefully never will. But imagine the hard feelings that would engender.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, and you say, well, it was totally an accident. Well, didn't you look, right? You back out of your driveway and not look around to see if my special pet is there?
Yeah.
This is what Ascanius does.
So you take it kind of his I mean, could you look at this episode and say, Ascanius, it's an albino stag. You should have known better?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's Virgil's point. It seems to me that Virgil's point, at least as I have traditionally or typically interpreted this, is he's showing that the cause of great human suffering and conflict can be actually quite inconspicuous and small.
Yeah.
So this leads to world war up and down the peninsula. And what's the cause? Accidentally shooting someone's favorite animal.
Right.
It seems so inconsequential.
Yeah, exactly. If you think about how World War II broke out, it's the, not to say that the assassination of the Archduke was.
You're thinking of World War I.
World War I.
That's right. Gavrilo Princip, the guy's name.
Exactly right. But if you read that story, kind of all the weird accidental things that had to happen for that to take place, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was in Yugoslavia, I think, Sarajevo. I remember first learning about that, and when I was in high school. And I think that the teacher made a good point, right? This was the catalyst, right? The fuse that lit the first major world conflict, and it seems so ridiculous at the start.
Right, and then one of my favorite details, in as much as someone can have a favorite detail about an assassination, is that Princip was there to do this deed.
Right.
He missed his first opportunity, and so
I didn't know that.
He gave up, and he actually went into a store and got a sandwich.
Really?
Came out with a sandwich, and the Archduke's car
just happened to be going by
and stalled, and he stepped forward and made the shot.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
So he was a member of the group, the Black Hand.
The Black Hand, yes,
right?
Yeah.
Anarchists.
Yeah.
And so the car stalled.
The car stalled, right? So there were other guys involved, and there was some bomb throwing that didn't go well.
Right.
And then the driver kind of panicked and was going to take another route to where he was supposed to give a speech, and it's stalled right in front of Princip, who's standing there with a sandwich in one hand and a gun in the other.
Incredible.
It's unbelievable.
Do you know what kind of sandwich it was?
I'm thinking it was some sort of salami.
You think so?
Because it was like an Italian deli or something.
You're being serious.
I am being serious.
I'm resisting the urge to make jokes based on past references because a man's life was taken here.
Yes.
And a world war was inaugurated.
Right.
But it's hard not to think of how ridiculous human life is sometimes.
Yeah.
He's standing there with a sandwich and assassinates the Archduke.
Yeah.
Francis Ferdinand, I think. And then World War.
World War.
Millions of people's lives were ruined.
Exactly. Yeah, so just one small domino knocks over a million others.
Yeah, the butterfly effect. So here we have a similar thing with the death of this favorite stag, this albino deer.
Right, and that falls into a trope that James Fraser,
The Golden Bough.
The Golden Bough talks about this in comparative mythology, about kind of the sacred animal that's killed and that leads to kind of bigger and more terrible things. And so this reminds me of Artemis has her favorite stag that is one of Hercules' labors to capture. He's not allowed to kill it, but he has to go and hunt it.
The Cyrenian hind.
Yes,
belongs to Artemis, right? And he ends up breaking off its antlers.
Right. He's got the golden antlers, right? And it's got bronze hooves.
He's got to run for a year to catch the animal.
Yes, right. I think the better corollary here are the Greeks who killed another sacred animal to Artemis at Aulis.
Right.
And she causes the winds to stop.
Right. And the sacrifice of Iphigenia.
Right. So it demands a human sacrifice. And so Fraser talks about that. You find this in lots of traditions. There's the sacred snake, the sacred bear, the sacred ram, even a sacred turtle and buzzard. That are killed, and then there's big fallout.
Well, I can see kind of an analog in domestic life. Right. Let's say in family life here, I'm not going to get too personal or autobiographical. In family life, if there's any kind of a little irritation or something, in the normal routines of marriage and family, if someone takes the last slice of pizza, right?
Yes.
Or, finishes off the last bit of cereal or whatever the food is, or you say you got a box of donuts that grandma dropped off, someone takes the last donut, that object becomes the unexpected catalyst for a much larger conflict.
It's very true.
Right?
It's so true.
You say, what are we arguing about? Well, we're not really arguing about the donut. There's bigger things behind this.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Now, in the last couple of weddings I've attended.
Can I ask first?
Yes, please.
Does that ever happen in the Winkle house?
Oh.
What I just described?
All the time. And my story is germane. And so last couple of weddings I've gone to, again, the reception, they'll have like a box where the bride and groom will ask, if you have advice for us, right? Put it in a box, right?
That seems like such a unwise thing to do. Ask for advice at your wedding? Don't give us any advice.
Please,
just leave us alone. Let us make all our own mistakes.
Exactly right.
Because who wants to read all of that immediately after you get married?
Right. Yeah. So both times they had like a box or a jar, and what I wrote down was, never take the last of anything.
Yes.
And I think that's, as far as advice goes, that's really good.
Nice job, Jeff.
Right.
That is excellent advice.
Yeah.
I wish you had come to my wedding and dropped that off. Never take the last of anything.
Yeah. So
now, in the perfectly unselfish home, right, there would just be rotten food everywhere.
Right. Yes, the unintended consequences of that. Right.
Because no one would take the last of anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So anyway, the shepherds and Queen Amata, they all clamor for Latinus, say, you gotta launch war against the Trojans. Again, Latinus, he does not want to. He's hesitant, but he recognizes that this situation is quickly spiraling out of his control. And then Juno pulls the plug on Allecto. So she's done enough and now starts to steer the conflict in a more personal kind of way. Yes.
So can I read some of the Lombardo translation here?
Right. I singled this out just because, it's maybe beating the Allecto thing a little bit to death, but it's such a great exit.
That's
she
an
gets.
Odd expression, to beat a fury to death. It is a great exit.
So give us the translation.
Yeah, it's a grand exit, right? All exits should be grand, and all entrances should be grand.
Really?
Isn't this how you come into the classroom? With fanfare and trumpets blazing and blasting?
I fantasized many years ago about having intro music, how a baseball player will come to the plate and they have their entry music.
They have their own song, right? Their theme song. What would yours be?
For a while I thought it would be Soul Man. Soul Man.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is it? Is it James Brown?
It's not. I forget who that is. It's not James Brown. But how about you? Off the top of your head, entry music?
Well, I'm thinking something from the Rocky genre, right?
Oh yeah.
Something that's got a little bit of a fighting beat. Something from Survivor.
Pumps up the class.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because it's all going to be downhill from there. So we got to key them up, right?
All right. Give us the Allecto's exit then.
Thus Juno, daughter of Saturn, serpents hissed in Allecto's wings as she spread them wide, leaving the world above for her home in Cocytus. There is a place in the heart of Italy, beneath towering mountains, the famed vale of Amsanctus. Dark woods surround it, and a stream roars through its center, spilling over rocks and swirling in eddies. Oh, the swirling eddies. Here can be seen a dread cavern and fissures through which the Dark Lord breathes, and a vast gorge that belches out Acheron. Here the Fury disappeared, relieving heaven and earth of her abhorrent presence.
Isn't that spectacular?
It is.
Right.
It's not only a great translation, right? It's a great translation of just brilliant poetry.
It's brilliant poetry, right? And I love I get how Virgil here doesn't just give Allecto a great exit. He locates this. He's basically saying, if you live in Italy, you too can go here.
That's right. You know exactly where it is.
Do you have any idea what the Vale of Amsanctus is? I couldn't picture that.
No, I did not know. So I looked it up.
Oh, what'd you find?
Well, it's along the Via Appia, and it is in Campania, right? So north of where, I guess south of Rome,
Yep.
between Rome and Naples. And apparently there are two little pots there. Sorry, did I say pots?
Say pots.
Pools.
Okay.
Two little pools there which exhale carbonic acid gas and hydrogen sulfide, according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
And a temple of the goddess Mephitis, and a cave for the release of these suffocating vapors.
Okay.
Which means it's the perfect spot
Perfect
to
spot.
imagine an entrance into the underworld, or an exit, in this case, from the upper world.
Right. Not entirely all that too far from a place like Cumae, right?
That's right.
And Lake Avernus. And
That's right.
Other sulfurous volcanic fumes.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
so-
what pours out of your faucet, right?
Yes. Right. All right. So Allecto's on the way out.
Yes.
And
so are we.
we are. So
We're up against it.
we are up against it. So when we begin next time, Juno is coming down to take things into her own hands, and she is going to open the gates of war.
That's correct.
And we're going to talk at some length about what that means and what that would have meant for a Roman.
Right. It's quite a process, I understand, to open the gates of war.
Really?
I don't think it's a combination lock. I think it's a series of skeletal keys, maybe.
No punch code, like, the
I don't think
5
so.
digits?
Or the
No?
little fob. We're so spoiled we don't have to remember anything.
Right.
Just hold up the little electrical doohickey and
Yeah.
it grants you access. This is a much more elaborate process.
You don't just step up and grab the handle.
No. To open the gates of war requires quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at some of the instances in Roman history of when the gates of war were opened.
Right.
A great name for a tour, right?
What a tour?
Yeah, for like a rock band tours, Gates of War.
Gates of War. I think the Swirling Eddies. That's what they
Did
called
they?
their 93 concert
That
tour.
doesn't seem right.
No, that's right. All right, Dave, we got to get out of here. So, as always, we have some people to thank. But before that, you want to tell us a little bit about the Moss method
I do.
and Latin per diem?
Yes, I would like to, indeed. So the Moss method is a Greek program I have developed that will take you from, what's it again? What's my slogan?
It's from neophyte to erudite.
Thank you. So neophyte is just a tender shoot of a Greekling. Erudite is someone who has who's graduated. They've been hard-boiled. They're no longer raw. They've learned all the material. So this is a narrative, self-paced, expert, accessible approach to the study of Greek. You learn Attic Greek in this program, which enables you to study the New Testament as well. Little known fact, Koine, the language of the New Testament, is directly descended from Attic.
Yeah.
So it's a twofer, you might say.
Fantastic.
So go to mossmethod.com, check out the many free instructional videos I've posted there. If you like the course, sign up. You can get the office hours with me every week. It's a good value. I don't think there's anything like it available in terms of expertise and price.
I think you're right. Now, what about the LLPSI?
That's correct. So the Lingua Latina per se illustrata, the great textbook put together by Hans Orberg. If you want to study some Latin, you want to go ab initio, from the ground up, I can give you a really strong foundation in the Latin language. And we just finished up our Black Friday Monsai, our Black Friday Cyber Monday sale. And the course is fantastic. We've got a brand new trailer. I think you've seen that trailer.
It's good.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
really nicely done. Mishka put that together.
Fantastic.
She's kind of a Jane of all trades for us. So this course costs $250. It gives you 33 instructional videos where I'm interacting with live students and teaching you the Latin language just from the very basic point.
Fantastic. And where can they find that?
So you need to go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI.
Excellent. All right, we got people to thank. Mishka, as always, thanks so much to her for all the wonderful work that she does.
Yes,
and how-
excellent.
The quick turnaround that
Right.
she does. Can't thank you enough. Scott Van Zen, Ken Tamplin, these are the guys that provide the great music that you hear.
That's right.
At the beginning.
The screaming guitar and the nice bumper music for the ads. Very
Yes.
generous, talented musicians. So thankful for their support and help.
Right. So, hey, if you want a shout out, if you got an idea for a for an episode, a complaint, a question, you can write to Dave at david@navseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V in there. There's no V in Jeff.
No.
But there is a V in ad nauseum.
Right. Also, check out oddnauseam.com. Again, the V.
Right.
And check out our store there.
Right.
Pick yourself up a nice Quai Noket Dokent t-shirt.
Yes, you can lurch with merch, as we say.
Yes, exactly. Right.
And
so next week,
we're going to go back into Book 7.
Back into Book 7.
Final episode of this particular book of the Aeneid.
Yep.
And then we're going to take a break for a couple episodes and mix things up a little bit.
Yes.
Maybe even have a holiday episode as we're coming up on the end of the year and Christmas and the New Year's.
Sounds good to me.
All right, Jeff, I think you have this week's gustatory parting shot.
Yes, this comes from Clive Staples Lewis, who once wrote, "He that but looketh on a plate of ham and eggs to lust after it hath already committed breakfast with it in his heart."
That's a turn of phrase there.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.